I think that's part of the point, actually, because we did do all the quantitative things that you do, and we looked for a fit against what we actually thought we needed. So we did all of that. We did, though, look at the company as a potential partner in a much more subjective way, and we were looking for a degree of cultural fit. So I think that's part of it, cultural fit. So what is the company that you work for like, and how do you think it will gel with a partner who it's ultimately going to become dependent on? I think the extent of that dependency is perhaps what we haven't fully bottomed out in our thinking. So I think an element of it is definitely very subjective. It is about what you see and how you feel in that relationship. And I don't think we should necessarily switch all that off. I think that is part of the evaluation process. We certainly use that in every other aspect of our lives. However, I think there are some objective ways in which you can look at those things. You can ask, I think, for references of where there have been significant shifts in a relationship. You can talk to the potential partner, but you can also talk to the client and ask them how it was for them. So I think you can understand some of those behaviours in a more objective way. I think you can have some discussion. You can preempt some of those scenarios and say, well, what's going to happen if? And you can make that a part of your negotiation. So whilst I think some of it is intuitive, I think some of it is measurable. You can get much harder evidence. Have we fully understood how to assess those things? I'm not sure we have. And it's not until we found ourselves in need of doing something really very big with the relationship that, of course, all of that's suddenly front of mind. And who do we have in this relationship? We're about to find out, in a significant way. So we need to get better at it. And I think we need to find some ways as an industry of understanding those dynamics. So I think it does have to be more than that, but I do think that has to be there. I was saying to someone after the session, if you don't feel good about these people now, you are not going to feel better about them in 2 years' time. So if at the outset you are uneasy with a company as a potential supplier, you don't feel that you can trust them, I think you do need to pay attention to that. But I don't think that can be enough. So it is some of the things I've already mentioned. I think you do need to talk to some other people who have first-hand experience, because they can tell you, beyond the rhetoric, beyond all the talk, what do they really do? So that whole reference-taking process, I think, perhaps takes on a different dimension, because typically, I think references are used in order to follow up information that you've already been told, most of which is probably quantitative, and to find out, what the experience of the other company was like. And you will eventually, if you get them in an unguarded way, they'll tell you something about what the experience has really been like. I think perhaps we should be looking for it the other way around. So actually going to find out what is it really like to work with these guys, and then if we happen to confirm some of the quantitative data, then that's fine. But trying a lot harder to understand the experience of working with the vendors, I think, is a place we can start. I think you can pre-negotiate it. So one thing that we didn't do, which we will do next time, is to pre-negotiate some of that flexibility. So although we can't actually understand exactly what the changes will be, we can understand in what dimensions they'll take place. So we know that there will be some skill sets that we initially want in a particular quantity, which will reduce in size, and then some other things will increase in size. We know that there's the likelihood that some aspects of delivery model will change. We know that maybe the overall size of the deal will either increase or decrease. So I think we can anticipate some of the dimensions of change. And whilst it's not possible to specify the numbers around those things, I think we can reasonably pre-negotiate the mechanisms and say, okay, in the event that I want to wind down one of the significant start capabilities, let's negotiate how long that's going to take, how it's funded, how we measure whether it's happened in an effective way or not, and then the corresponding, okay, so we have a need for something new. What's a reasonable time for you to source that skill set for us? How much is it going to cost us to create it with you? How do we measure its effectiveness? How do we ensure that the resources are not just the recycled people who we've just wound down, who actually don't know anything. You know, I think we can pre-negotiate those things, and we can explain how those changes are going to happen. Now, I think in that pre-negotiation, particularly if we make that a contractual mechanism, we'll find out whether the company's serious. You know, if they say actually, well, we'd rather not, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. I think we know that there is, you know, it's highly likely that change is going to be resisted, or it's going to be embraced, but at considerable cost to us. You know, if the company says they're very happy to engage in that kind of conversation, and we can agree reasonable terms for how those things will take place, we can have a degree of confidence. And of course, if that becomes contractual, it does become a very hard mechanism by which we can handle some of these things. But I think you can have both. So I think for what you do know, you can still be very rigorous about the way that you specify it. So there's no need to say, actually, let's not be rigorous, let's just be very change orientated. It's all very transient anyway. We don't need to take that approach. We can be very rigorous about what we know today. We can be very rigorous actually about the mechanisms by which things will change. So I don't think we have to throw out the basic disciplines of our legal colleagues. However, I do think we need to lead our legal colleagues because, as I mentioned in the actual talk, I think our legal colleagues are trying to mitigate the legal risk. They're not necessarily trying to create operational success, particularly in situations that neither they or we can anticipate. So that's a big ask of them. So I think that's where we have to provide some leadership and say, yes, we do want all those things, but we also want this, because we know from experience that this is going to change. And we need you to stretch your thinking to consider some future scenarios or some kind of meta scenarios almost, and think about the legal constructs that might lower our risk in those. You know, they may or may not happen, but you can help us think that through. So I think we have to stretch our legal colleagues and show some leadership to them, and maybe take some risk on their behalf. Maybe we have to tell them, you know, in the end, we'll take the risk. Yeah, because we understand that we're doing something new. I think ultimately the legal profession has to adapt in the same way that we are, because you simply cannot predict the future. Well, I think it's like all relationships. There come moments when you've got decisions to make as to how you handle situations. So I think that whole give and take scenario, you know, if something means that a great deal to your supplier, if it's helpful for you to do certain things for them, and actually there's nothing in it for you, you know, to consider doing them, because I think it's likely that fosters something in return. So there's the simple things about just behaviour, and where you have discretion to exercise discretion in the interest of creating partnership rather than destroying it. I think also partnership is partly about understanding each other. So, for example, we always talk through the metrics that our HCL account partner has that will make him a success or not, and I talk through my metrics for the year. Because sometimes there's easy things that I can do that help his metrics go in the right direction, which are indifferent to me. I could do it two ways, but I can choose to help him. And I think having an understanding of what makes each organisation successful is helpful, because then you have the option of deciding in favour of that rather than against it. But I think actually the deepest thing is if you show an intention for the relationship to be long-term, because it then becomes possible strategically for a partner to sacrifice the short-term in the interest of the long-term. And that's what I believe HCL have done. They haven't just done this because they're nice. They've done it because they've seen our business shift in a different direction, and they know that if they want to be a part of that business for the next 10 years, they need to shift with it, or else they won't be positioned in the right place when the renewal conversations come. So yes, it's partly about their cultural values, it's partly about their behaviours, but it's partly about their interests, but seen in a long-term time horizon rather than a short-term time horizon. So I think partnership has a lot of attributes to it. I think it is rare, actually.